We'll give everyone just another minute or two, and then we'll get kicking. Sari, thank you so much. You're kicking us off. We're streaming live on YouTube now.
That's right.
Okay, great. Thank you. So just so everyone knows, we are streaming live on YouTube. If you choose not to, want to participate in that, feel free to drop off now. A recording will become available for all the folks that want to. So before we kind of get into that, if you do want to drop off because we're streaming, that's okay. Otherwise, this is going to be a fun 45 minutes to about an hour of an interactive workshop here, primarily discussing remote selling and thinking about how remote selling has recently changed, primarily through a lot of the things, the events that have happened inside of the world. So before we go into that, though, I really want to make sure that we get the most out of our session together here. And getting the most out of our session together will take a few things. The first is utilizing the chat functionality. So throughout the session here today, I have a couple of friends with me. I have Kit Mueller. Kit, you want to wave hello? Great, thank you. I also have a couple other folks from my team here, Ken and Sari. They're also going to be monitoring the chat as we go through our session today. That being said, feel free to drop any questions that you have, any comments inside of the chat. Also, if you want to double click on anything throughout this process, we're happy to do that as well. So the first thing, I want to make sure that everyone can find the chat functionality. Can everyone type in their name and where in the world they're located right now? So in the chat, please type in your name and where in the world are you located right now. All right, Thor in Denmark, Sadie in Toronto, George in London, Matt in Pittsburgh, Kevin in Pittsburgh, Ed in the UK, coming from London. So your name and where you are located in the chat. Great. Celia, San Francisco. Celia, nice to see you. Thanks for joining. Kit in Pittsburgh. Great. So we have a couple of people distributed throughout the US and all over the world here. The other thing that's going to be important is that throughout our session today, we're actually going to be engaging in some active or some live polling. So we're going to be using the chat for that. So I want everyone to just make sure anytime that I ask a question, I'll probably present A, B, C, or D. So feel free to just drop that in the chat. That way we can start to understand. I'll also have links that we'll be able to share in there as well. I'll prompt Sari or a couple other folks to drop maybe some tools or other things. So that's how we get the most out of today's session. Now, before we do that, I want to just take a quick poll to understand where everyone is really. And what we're seeing today is that organizations are having different problems across the organization, and it really depends on what state you're in. Now, it might be getting leads, so driving new inbound today, or it could be the actual process of winning deals, converting actual deals today, or C, it could be more of a customer success or retention issue. So that could be the retention or the expansion across those segments. Or if you're really lucky, it could be all of the above. So what I want everyone to do is that inside of the chat, I want you to either type A, B, C, or D, all of the above. What is your biggest revenue problem today? A, B, C, or D? All right, I see B, conversion. I see A, getting some leads today. I see A and B from a few folks. A, so a lot of top of the funnel stuff, getting leads today, creative online marketing. So we'll definitely discuss ways to address some of that creative online marketing. C, retention or expansion. So keeping customers, great. All right. So what we're going to be doing today is addressing all of these specific areas as it relates to the revenue problem. It seems like there's going to be a focus today, at least on the front end, about getting leads, using some creative marketing, and how we're actually able to assist you with that creative marketing. So moving on now, what we're going to do is walk through a 6-part agenda today. First, we're going to discuss what is meaningless selling. So this whole concept of moving away from meetings. And I think I was a little provocative in the sense that it's more than just having a Zoom account, but we're going to talk about what actually is meaningless selling. Then we're going to talk about how do we use tools as a force multiplier. So tools that we can use to actually assist us or accelerate the deal cycle. The other thing too is that we have to take a science-based approach to all of this, So a science-based approach to all of this. So understanding the mathematical model that actually supports the whole concept of meaningless selling and accelerating the sales cycle. And then in addition to that, measuring the impact. measuring the impact of two areas, functionally, the effectiveness, then the efficiency. So thinking about your effectiveness, whether it's out in the field or your team's effectiveness as you're managing them, and then the efficiency of yourself, the business, and your team. And then last but not least, discuss some next steps or some applicable ways for us to put these into practice and actually get some meaningful use out of them. Before we do that, I know a few people have just joined, so feel free to turn on your video. You can go on mute. Feel free to use the chat, and it's going to be monitored throughout our course or out our workshop today. Feel free to jump in at any point and say hello or ask any questions that you may have. All right. So moving on into our first topic, let's get right into it. What is meaningless selling? What is this whole concept of meaningless selling? Before I do that, I just want to kind of understand where people are today. So looking at different sales organizations today, first is mostly in person. So understanding that mostly in person with a combination of some remote selling. So out in the field, and then you go and maybe have some virtual meetings like we're having today. Then there's organizations that are mostly remote and then will supplement with some remote selling. So this may be events, it may be some industry specific things that you want to go to, or it may even be the kind of commitment or final presentation to a stakeholder is that mostly remote was paired with some of the in-person. And then last but not least is that true inside sales model. Maybe you meet at some industry events, maybe you don't, but this is 100% kind of remote. What I want everyone to do is drop in the chat, where do you kind of fit into this spectrum? Are you A, B, C, or D? And for the folks that are on a product-led growth, products like Dropbox and some of those other ones where you can just sign up and use the product, feel free to select D. All right, so I see some A, mostly in-person, Matt, with some remote. Thor is B, mostly remote with some in-person sprinkled in here and there. Thor, if you don't mind, in the chat, what type of meetings are you doing in person? What are those in-person meetings? Kevin, you as well. For any of the folks that entered in B, what are those in-person meetings look like? What are those types of meetings that you guys are engaging in today? Okay, demos, onboarding, great. So it looks like we kind of all fit into at least one of these categories here, or a combination of one of these categories here, which is pretty common for most organizations today. We're really kind of blending these things together. And I think the real key here is that the speed can really vary from each one of these and the velocity of not only your sale. And one thing to note is that I'm using sales and I think about organizations in two ways: people that build product and then people that sell product, people that build product and then people that sell product. And for the folks that I'm talking about today, that's customer success, or people that sell product, customer success, marketing, and BDRs, account executives. Next, it would also be solution engineers or anyone there. So I'm using the word sales interchangeably, but it's all the folks that either help support that product, right, or people that help build it. So selling or building the products there. So thinking about this, it can apply to pretty much every organization, and thinking about the speed that can vary. Now, per deal, using technology can either help or hurt us. And whenever I look at it, on-site deals are probably the slowest way, only because of the amount of time that it actually takes to coordinate getting individuals in person. And then going a little bit further on the spectrum, we have a hybrid of in-person and remote. Then we have that 100% kind of remote or inside sales model. Now today we're going to talk about meeting lists, and then last but not least, the dedicated playbook that we can start to create around that. But for the purpose of today is that thinking about how do we utilize technology to move into this meetingless sales model, or a combination of that meetingless and online sales model, to help accelerate the deal cycle rather than slow it down by continuing to use these synchronous deals. So this quote really stood out to me here. This task, not so much to see what no one has seen yet, but to think what nobody has thought yet about what everyone sees. And what I'm going to do is kind of dissect the interesting thing about this is that talk about the way that deals are happening today, or the way that meetings are actually happening today. So thinking about the original on-site meeting. And so what I'm going to depict in here, I'm going to describe what we're actually looking inside of this image here, is that you as the seller and all of the different personas that you're trying to bring in together all meet together at the same time and same place on site, or in one location together. This is what we call the synchronous meeting. So this is where you'd calendar a meeting, you'd coordinate 3 or 4 different schedules together and get everyone in the same room. To further expand on that, we continue to do that with some of the other meetings. So this might be our first engagement with them. That might be a discovery meeting or a demonstration or a combo of both of disco demo. In addition to that, we're going to continue to do those synchronous meetings. So we wait a few weeks, a couple days, whatever that time may be. It may even be a couple months, depending on the size of your deal or the type of product that you are selling. Then you move into a proposal. Same action happens, again being synchronous. Same time, same place. Now, there could be some hybrids, some individuals joining remotely, but we find ourselves going on site, having these meetings. And then last but not least, that commitment meeting. The problem here is that there's a lot of time that happens in between these meetings. There's a lot of time that happens in between these meetings. The other thing too is that it requires an immense amount of coordination on the part of not only the sales professional, but also the prospect. So there's a burden that we're putting on them to organize and get everyone in the same room together. Now, what's been happening since everything in the world has changed here is that we've been replacing these in-person meetings with online meetings. So what we're doing is potentially taking this exact same meeting today and moving it to a particular Zoom meeting. So now we're all in different places, but we still need to meet synchronously. And this is what we're actually participating in right now, is that we're simply converting this now into an online meeting. The same types of meetings that we're having today, we're simply asking individuals to meet us from wherever they are in a virtual environment at a specific time. Now, the challenge, or what we're recognizing today in the world, is that this meeting style is actually continuing to slow down the deal cycle. We're still required to align multiple stakeholders across various time zones to meet in the same place to be synchronous. Now, what we're going to talk about today is the changes that we can make to actually move to a more asynchronous model. So what I'm depicting here is that this is still our synchronous meeting here, multiple stakeholders meeting at the same time. But what we can do is now start to do things asynchronously and reach out to these independent personas inside of our deal cycle at different points in time, and that we don't actually need to connect with them at the same time. So independent places of time, independent of place and time, allows us to sell asynchronously. Now, that does not mean that there's still not a lot of merit or value to having synchronous meetings like we're participating in right now. However, it just means that we can use asynchronous meetings to actually speed up our deal cycles and eliminate maybe some of those hurdles or burdens that we previously put on ourselves and on the organization, and then also propagate information throughout them. Now, what's really interesting about that is by doing that, thinking about our time to close over this axis right here, this can actually help us shorten the sales cycle by no longer requiring all of the individuals to meet at the same time and place. Now we no longer have to worry about calendaring and scheduling, getting everyone in the same room. We can simply now engage people and shorten the sales cycle this way. And more importantly, as it relates to the business, this helps accelerate our time to cash. What I've heard from more clients than ever is that we are trying to accelerate the time that we reach cash. We want to make sure that we are pulling deals forward more than we ever have been, and also being more efficiently selling these deals. All right, and so last but not least is increasing that win rate across that as well. Less meetings, therefore, means we have to convert less across each one of those meetings. And we're going to discuss today some of the mathematics behind how do we actually increase that win rate to be more effective as sales professionals. All right, I'm going to take a quick drink of water. Before I do, I want to engage everyone here. Does this resonate with everyone? I want us to use the reactions here. Feel free to give a thumbs up inside of there. You can do it real life, or you can just put it inside of there. All right, so I'm seeing some great thumbs up. Great. It seems like we're all on the same page here. Thinking about some of the ways that we can actually go from synchronous to asynchronous. How do we reduce the overall sales cycle? How do we become more efficient at that sales process? And the next thing that we're really going to do is discuss how do we actually use tools and tool sets as a force multiplier. So the first thing I'd like to do is actually, I'm going to play a quick video from Steve Jobs here. What I want everyone to do is, again, give me a reaction or a quick thumbs up just to ensure that everyone can hear the audio. It's going to take about 10 or so seconds for it to build out, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
I remember reading an article when I was about 12 years old, I think it might have been in Scientific American, where they measured the efficiency of locomotion for all these species on planet Earth. How many kilocalories did they expend to get from point A to point B? And the condor one came in at the top of the list, surpassed everything else, and humans came in about a third of the way down the list, which was not such a great showing for the crown of creation. And but somebody there had the imagination to test the efficiency of a human riding a bicycle. Human riding a bicycle blew away the condor, all the way off the top of the list. And it made a really big impression on me that we humans are tool builders, and that we can fashion tools that amplify these inherent abilities that we have to spectacular magnitudes. And so for me, a computer has always been a bicycle of the mind.
Great. So let's pause there. So Steve is making the point here that computers are actually a bicycle of the mind, and that what are the bicycles for us today as individuals? What can we use? What are the tools that we use to help us make us more efficient, to beat out nature, and to understand what are those things that we can do? So thinking about the various and very specific areas of the sales cycle today, lead generation seemed to be a focus for most folks. We're then going to discuss navigating the organization. Lead generation is exactly what we imagine. This could be that old school style, getting people on the golf course and creating interactions there. Navigating the organization could be taking your some friends or individuals out for beer, starting to understand a little bit more about them. In old school type selling, it was also just kind of walking around the office and popping your head into different people's cubes and understanding the different personalities and personas that engage there. Then the stakeholder meeting, that large primary meeting that we get with all the individuals together. Proposal review, this is typically held over a dinner or something like that. Really get in on site and bring all those constituents together. And then last but not least, that reference call. So we're going to discuss these 5 very specific parts of the sales process and how we can use tools specifically. So I'm going to alternate back and forth between my deck here as well as some of the tools here to show you these things live, because we're actually using these tools today and they're very effective. So these are proven tools that we use today to actually drive action inside of each one of these. So the idea in brief here, whenever we're thinking about lead generation, is that enterprise sales reps are really good at leveraging their brands in person. And they're really good at networking. And that's what I found that most enterprise sales reps really pride themselves on, is the strength of their network. And they believe that the network is not the company's, but it's their own. Oftentimes, many years ago, you would see job postings for sales professionals, especially in the enterprise, that they're looking for a book of business for you to bring over. They want you to bring your book over. And that was wholly owned by the enterprise sales rep, not the organization. But in this case now, they guard that book and they consider it very, very important for themselves. And so the reason why I bring this up is that oftentimes these enterprise sales reps are also against using some of these more modern tools against their network. So they don't want to go out on Twitter, or they don't want to go out on their personal LinkedIn and blast out company marketing. They don't want to put all that content that might be braggadocious, because they feel very strongly about their network that it may either offend them or it may come off as a little callous, because that's not the way that they typically choose to interact, or that message is not correct for them. And the reason why I bring that up is that the content is not the right content for them to share. The content is not the right content for them to share. So the content that your company is making today is not geared towards that enterprise rep to create and generate this. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go into a live demo of a couple of tools here, but thinking about how do we use something like LinkedIn, or how do we use other places to actually help develop a lead. And what's more important to remember is that a real person's brand is 10 times more powerful than a company's brand. There's a few folks here, Kit's nodding his head over there, and there's a few other folks that believe that whenever you have a very strong brand, a very strong personal brand, it resonates more. People want to hear more from Jerimiah rather than they do want to hear from the W. The W is an organization, and people relate to people. They don't relate to organizations. So what we're going to do today is talk about tools to actually help and develop a lead here, and thinking about that through high quality content. So the first step here is that we need high quality content. When I say high quality content, it could be either the invitation that we generated here, a video, or some images that we put inside of there. So I'm going to transition into my LinkedIn. Can everyone just give me a thumbs up that they can now see a different screen here? Great, thank you. So this is a post that you guys may have engaged with. This was on my LinkedIn here. What I did was I included a few interesting things here, tagged other individuals, created an agenda, also shared some high quality content about what the agenda is so people start to engage here. There is a magic number that we found out about some of the content here that I'd like to highlight. You can see Jocko, one of our colleagues as well, did something recently. He did something very similar too, using about 5 images. Does anyone know why using multiple images could be beneficial? In the chat, does anyone know why, or have any ideas on why using multiple images could be helpful? Using multiple images can be helpful because it allows people to stay there longer. People are going to engage with your content for longer. And now they're no longer just scrolling simply past that post that you have on LinkedIn that's inside of the feed. They're now taking a look and thinking, hey, there's a couple things for me to look at here. I want to digest them. Maybe this is something that I could consider sharing with other individuals. Now, whenever I think about LinkedIn posts, I don't like to look at maybe the popularity metrics. This is not an Instagram post. I'm not looking for how many people have liked this. I really care about the comments and then the shares. The comments and then the shares. Those are some of the most important things that we need to look at whenever we're thinking about developing a lead: comments and shares. And the reason why I say this is that although there was a lot of likes here, I have 41 likes, I do have 9 comments. And then also 2,200 views of this particular post speaks to the efficacy of the type of content that we're actually putting in here. So we don't want to simply we don't simply want to focus on the amount of likes that we're receiving. We want to see that people are engaging. So we see Melissa is engaging here. We see Jeff is engaging here. People showing up here, Ethan as well, other people tagging one another's here. These are people in and outside of my network that I may know, or it may have been shared here. The other power here too is that as other individuals start to repost, you're actually able to see these. So now you're able to see other posts. So Kit went ahead and reposted this. Jocko and a few others, Ken himself too, reposted this. And that sharing starts to actually attract and then develop leads. So this is almost like an experiment, and everyone here almost participated into it. We didn't promote it any other way except through LinkedIn and except through sharing here. This is the power in actually developing leads through strong content. So coming back into the deck here, we want to make it visually stunning here, adding content, making sure that it's good so people want to engage with it. Again, make something very shareable that we're able to share with everyone. Curate and create it. So you need a ready profile. When I say a ready profile, it needs to have a clear, actionable headline to it. So I help B2B SaaS companies do X. You can also have a high quality profile photo. That can be done simply on a white background like I have behind me today, or using portrait mode on an iPhone. You don't need to get fancy and have crazy camera setups. It's really easy just to isolate yourself behind a background, find a solid wall somewhere, and create that ready profile. In addition to that, you can add an opinion or curate it for your audience, sharing how information about what you do, who you are, or your story is also happy, as well as adding a call to action to get people to sign up. Now, there is some conflicting information, but I think we've confirmed it now with LinkedIn. You can actually put it directly on your post if you want people to register like I did. However, you can also drop it in the comments as well if you're looking to drive a little bit more engagement on that particular post. Last but not least, we then want to share this with our network. And I think the real key here is that we want to create this shared experience. We're actually sending it privately to our network. So in this case, we'd actually start going through and looking at the particular people that either commented or liked or actually shared our post, and then engage them directly. Thanks for sharing my post today. I think you could benefit from joining our workshop. Here's a direct link. This creates a high level of engagement, and now we're truly developing that lead. The same thing can happen across your entire organization. Not only can one individual do this, but multiple individuals on either the same pod or even across multiple different pods can do the same process. Now this becomes an inbound process of developing the leads, and then you can create a conversation here. So in summary here, thinking about generating leads, using tools as a force multiplier, networking online is similar to the way that we can do it in person here. We can provide insightful and quality content, and that's what people want to engage with today. We can simply ask for referrals, we can respond to the inbound, or we can place the outbound call. So we can engage them directly here. Just by a reaction here, either a thumbs up or feel free to drop a question inside of the chat here. Does this resonate with everyone in terms of how do we utilize LinkedIn, or how do we use some content to actually drive some inbound today? All right, great. So as we continue on here, so I see a question in the chat here. Are there any tools that can help automate some of the manual tasks here, such as sending privately? There are definitely, Vlad, there's definitely some tools out there today that can help you automate this process. A-Text is one that I like to use frequently. Even though it does not automate the actual process of sending that specific message, that's where the research or that particular nuance comes to reaching out to people directly. You can, in fact, use A-Text to actually propagate the information that you want to drop in very quickly. So you can create little shortcuts for yourself. So that's one tool that we can drop in there. Ken, if you don't mind, maybe drop a link to A-Text in there as a follow-up. All right, so moving on here, going on to this whole concept of navigating the organization. Most buyers' online profiles today have a depth of information to facilitate this navigation process. We have more information about our prospects than we ever have before. And what's really interesting about that is that remote selling allows us to do this faster and at a significantly lower cost. Previously, this usually entailed some form of getting people together for a happy hour or having an on-site meeting in a different city or going somewhere and helping them with something and creating some sort of relationship or doing a roundtable with them and a few other individuals to help navigate that organization. Today, we're actually able to do this in a more effective way. So thinking about this, I'm going to be using a methodology that I'm obviously familiar with from Winning by Design here, but thinking about this process. So let's think about the process that happens today as it relates to navigating the organization. Someone starts to do some research about a challenge or a problem that they're having today, and that's our initiator. That initiator reaches out to the organization in some form. Maybe it's downloading a piece of content. Maybe it's reaching out to a contact us form. Maybe it's simply having a conversation with someone that they know inside of our organization. They will then either engage a champion or a user. The champion says, hey, this is definitely something that's been on our radar for a long time. I like where you're at today. I want to introduce you to the person who owns maybe the P&L or has the greatest to benefit in that case, and that's our decider. This right here becomes our turn-by-turn directions for how we need to start to think about navigating the organization, applying different strategies to each one of the personas at different points during the sales cycle. So I'm going to give you guys this is a screenshotable item. I'll give you guys in about 2 minutes here. There's a fully built out slide that I'll recommend taking a screenshot at that point. So hang tight while we kind of build the rest of this here. So thinking about this, this is the true kind of understanding of each one of these executive buyers. These are the people or the personas that we're looking to engage with throughout the entire conversation. They have different actions at different places, and each one of these represents one of the different actions or multiple different actions that they'll take over the course of that buying decision, or as that decision criteria is start to be built out and that decision process is now being alluded to. So this is a great place to take a screenshot. I'm going to stop for just a second so everyone could do that. All right, so moving on here, I want to talk about some of those initiators and some of the tools and things that we can use to identify who those initiators are and the types of personas and information that we can speak to. The reason why I think it's important for us to think about the initiator first is that we can use particular tools to actually help navigate or understand that persona of that individual. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to jump back onto LinkedIn here, utilizing this tool. What I'm going to show you is some interesting tools to help us actually navigate here. So I'm going to pull up Dominique. She is actually our co-CEO here at Winning by Design. What I want to show you now is this tool on the right-hand side allows us to open up and inform us about her personality. So what we're able to see now here is something very interesting about who she is. Can everyone see my screen just by a thumbs up here? Okay, great, thank you. This allows us to see here information about Dominique, tells us about how she likes to be communicated to, the quick tips on how do we actually approach these individuals. It even gives us some coaching on how do we actually talk to her. And then below here, we're going to talk about this a little bit more, a DISC profile. And then it really kind of creates other ways to engage with her, stressors, communication styles, and even specifically the things to include or not include while emailing someone. Now, I bet all of you are thinking to yourself, how do I get this tool? How do I start to use it? I use it with a lot of effectiveness. I'll share what the tool is in just a couple minutes here. I'll have Sari drop it into the chat here. It's a really effective tool. You get 10 free uses, and I find those really effective. You'll probably use the first one on yourself and your life partner or the person that you live with, just to understand, are we actually copacetic and can we figure out better ways to communicate? And the rest, you can actually start now looking at different personalities and different individuals that you want to prospect here. The real power in this tool is that you can see a lot of information about them, and you can actually guide the way that you reach out to those individuals. So do provide a high-level summary here. Try to keep the conversation focused. React quickly to their feedback. Now, all the impressions that I got and all the people that I've pulled so far on this have said the level of accuracy is almost unbelievable. I was really shocked myself here. So this tool here is called Crystal Knows. Sarah, if you don't mind, drop it in the chat now. Crystal Knows here. This is a really great tool for us to do that. Last but not least is it also shows us some email advice. And I believe this is probably one of the strongest areas of this tool for us, is that the email advice actually allows us to indicate what type of conversation that we want to have, but also the things that we do and should not do during this conversation. So the things that we should do and to avoid through there, as well as even the type of call to action or the type of body of email that we should put out here. They also have some full playbooks. So if we want to ask for advice, we simply want to schedule a meeting, or we actually want to ask for maybe even offer a job or a potential customer follow-up. All of those are indicated here. So I'm going to jump back into the slide here, utilizing these tools to better understand some of the things about this. So Crystal Knows, plug-in to know personality based on other profiles here. The other thing too is that I mentioned that there is a DISC profile here. So if you're familiar with the DISC profiles here, going to jump back into Dominique's profile. What we can see here is that Dominique is actually an initiator, and it also compares your personality, as long as you've actually created your profile as well, to hers. So finding out I'm in the driver category, she's in the initiator category here. What this actually does now is we're able to actually apply those to that navigating the org, or to that blueprint that we just discussed here. So knowing that Dominique could be the initiator for us, this is now gives us some intelligence on how to navigate that organization. Now, what we see here too is where the other personalities start to fall on this DISC profile. This allows us to build a comprehensive view of navigating the organization, all from the comfort of our homes, but also in a really efficient way. So in a matter of 10, 15, or 20 minutes, we can do some light research and at least apply each one of these personas to those individuals. Now, with some more dedicated research, we're actually able to dig in and identify the ways that people prefer to be communicated and help inform our strategies as we continue to go through the navigation process here. So I want to pause here quickly and just kind of summarize here. It's easy for us now to navigate the org and use tools as a force multiplier here. We want to identify the people in the organization faster. We can develop rapport with them by using some of the tools that we just discussed, and then we can do it in a more scalable and more efficient way. So this is a really great way for us to be able to navigate the organization in a low-cost manner. Next is the stakeholder meeting. Stakeholders are spread over tons of different regions and time zones. For any of the folks that are selling in the enterprise today, scheduling an on-site meeting can sometimes take weeks. And if you've ever been in that process of scheduling an on-site meeting, it taking a long time, there's a few different nuances to it. One, it could just be because you're trying to bring everyone to the same location. You may be waiting on a particular event when other people are already going to be in the same place. That may be another conference or something like that. So you have a larger constituency because companies want to be more efficient with their dollars. They don't want to spend so much on business travel to get all the people in the same place if they're already going to do that in a few weeks anyway. That being said, this can slow down the buying cycle. Even though they want to meet with us faster, there may be things that are preventing them from meeting with us faster in this case. So with remote selling, we can do this immediately and at a significantly lower cost. So whenever I think about it, it's hard to get there. And also, in my opinion, I think that oftentimes these stakeholder meetings take on a hybrid approach. They take on a hybrid approach. Now, for everyone here, just give me a reaction here. Has anyone been in a stakeholder meeting where half of the audience was in the room and the other half was maybe on a Zoom or some other virtual thing? Just by a thumbs up or something like that. This often happens here. And what I think that happens is that this creates a very odd power dynamic. So it creates a very odd power dynamic. The individuals that are on the screen there typically don't get as much attention, or they don't get the opportunity to speak as much. The other thing too is that this becomes a very debalanced meeting for the individuals that are on the Zoom there. They don't, and then there's also other individuals too. Individuals that may not want to actually have this meeting, they may be detractors, so they don't want to join the meeting, or they could potentially slow that meeting down for any reason. The other thing too is that oftentimes people get cut off. I'm sure we've all experienced, and there's a lot of memes about this too, about someone jumping on and dinging in and people talking over one another over the Cisco kind of phone network and things like that. The reason why I bring this up is that this is a really hard roadblocker because people like to have these kind of one-on-one conversations, or they like to be able to discuss particular materials. The other thing too is technology issues happen to come up, and then also maybe physical presentations never make their way into that particular office. So we're going to discuss how do we take what is considered maybe a debalanced meeting today in this hybrid form for the stakeholder meeting and turn it into a more virtual meeting. So what you're looking at here is an actual stakeholder meeting that we had at Winning by Design. I have a couple of my colleagues here. You're looking at the top, Max, Jocko, and Rulof from Winning by Design here. Everyone here actually has their camera on. They have a very similar background to what I have today. I obviously didn't get the memo about the black shirt, but next time I will. That being said, they all have a uniform look. And this only takes a little bit of ingenuity to create one of these backgrounds. You can use a very simple white background like I have today. A lot of people use projector screens and other things like that. You can also use a virtual background if you choose to, if you have a very noisy background or a lot of things going on in the back there. You can also start to use things like lights or other ring lights or other things to start to illuminate you so you have proper lighting. And then you can even modify the way that your camera looks as well to have more high definition. So cameras, projector screens, ring lights, or any kind of backlighting are very helpful whenever you're on these meetings so that you're evenly lit and everyone can actually see your expression. The other thing I'd like to notice is that the distance that you are from the camera plays a very big role in the way that you interact with your prospects, or in this case, your stakeholders in this case. You want to be nose to nose with those individuals. This is a place where you're actually able to see people's reactions. You're able to see the way that they're talking. You're able to see the way that their eyes are moving, whether they're distracted or not. And all the names also are all readable. The way that we see this today, if everyone looks at my profile, it says Jerimiah Lancaster, Winning by Design. I always add the organization that I'm with, especially in a larger environment like this, but this is a great way to indicate who you are. You can do that simply by clicking the 3 dots on the upper right-hand corner of your video and rename yourself and add your company in there as a way to do that. So you can find this and get this all set up prior to it. So I would encourage that we send out some prep documents to every stakeholder meeting that we have, indicating that we prefer them to have their video on, to be in an environment where they're actually able to have a candid conversation and be able to engage with us either through the chat or some of the other functionality that we'll talk about in just a moment here. So what I'd like to do is that reading visual cues is such a large part of the stakeholder meeting. And that's what a lot of the impression that I got from individuals is that we can only have these on-site meetings because I'll never be able to judge the reactions or see how the CFO interacts or the VP of people wants to talk about this. And I can see that they shifted back in their seat a little bit. So what I want everyone to do inside of the chat here, answer the first question for me. Who appears to be distracted? Who appears to be distracted? A, B, C, D, E, or F? Who appears, in this case, to be distracted? Okay, a couple answers here. I see F, A, and F. Yes, A and F here. I see Patrick as well as Shiraj. Yes. Okay, I think everyone's kind of on the same page here. We definitely see that F here. Patrick actually joined us for a workshop just like this, and we used his image, and he even validated that he was distracted. He was doing something else on his phone at this very time. So for everyone that answered F, you're exactly right. Patrick was definitely distracted. Suraj was looking in an alternate direction as well. This is really important because now we can read that body language. This is very different than having that phone there. We want to make sure that everyone has their video on, is engaging that nose-to-nose way. Now, who appears here wanting to talk a little bit more? Who looks like they're on the cusp of actually saying something, or they want to engage the rest of the group? All right, we got C here. Okay, C as well. See everyone jumping in on the C answer. And you're exactly right here. He wants to speak. You can actually see his box starting to light up here, indicating that he wants to speak, that he wants to engage the group here. People are now starting to think about, how do we engage? So this is a way for us to start thinking about these stakeholder meetings and turn these into a really interesting way to judge not only those visual cues, but we can also do some other interesting things with these. Now, we utilize some of the chat here inside of our workshop together, but I like to think about also using the chat inside of these stakeholder meetings. Oftentimes I see a lot of sidebar conversation happening inside of Zoom today. It may be even happening inside of our session today. You can message people privately. You can have a one-off conversation. You might ask someone to double click on something or say, I don't fully understand that idea. Can you send me a resource to something? Or where was that actually highlighted in the proposal that we're reviewing right now? I lost my place, or I had to step away for just a minute. I want to make sure you can catch me up on something. We want to identify who is listening and who is distracted, but also how do we engage individuals with those sidebar conversation? So now we can have this extremely productive way to do this inside of the chat here. So people can say, is there proof that works for, is there proof that this works for a similar client to us? And then Max can say, here's a link to a similar peer, dropping that right in there. The reason why this is so important is that you can share a document. You can highlight an area, and this eliminates the need for follow-up. It eliminates the need for follow-up, and it eliminates the need for back and forth emails, again, extending the sales cycle, therefore bringing efficiency to our sales process. Every action can be a failure in progressing a deal. Every action that is required can be a failure in progressing the deal. The reason why is that those actions can fall through the cracks here, or they can take time for us to either formulate or get to the client and slow things down, allowing competitors to insert themselves throughout that process. All right, so to summarize here, the stakeholder meeting, we can do this now virtually through Zoom, through a couple different ways. One, engaging our group, making sure that we have this high quality setup. Also judging body language and ensuring that we have people that are there, utilizing our colleagues or aides to actually help navigate the chat, but also share relevant documents and allows for those one-on-ones and provides immediate follow-up, no longer allowing us to take time to do those more lengthy follow-ups and extend the sales cycle a little bit more. It also democratizes attendance too. So there's no excuse for anyone not to show up. Maybe it might be that particular time. However, everyone now has a voice and can chat, engage at any point that they see fit, and it's easier and faster to get everyone in the room. So just by a thumbs up, does this resonate with everyone so far on how do we generate some leads here, navigate the organization with tools, and then also have more effective stakeholder meetings? Show me a thumbs up in the reactions here while I grab a glass of water. Thank you. All right, so moving on now to proposal review, thinking about how do we utilize tools to actually do proposal reviews. And candidly, this is probably one of the things that is most impactful to eliminating some of those lengthy sales cycles. So submitting a proposal is simply like throwing it over the wall. So just by show of hands here, you can raise your hand, thumbs up, whatever it may be. Who right now today has a proposal review meeting? A proposal review meeting. So you do some sort of proposal review. You curated some sort of pricing for those individuals. Great. So I see a few people having these proposal review meetings. These meetings are typically where we send a proposal over for them to review prior, and then we review it in post with them. So they have comments about it. They reviewed the price. They have questions about the price, specific line items and things like that. By using remote selling, what I'm going to show you today is you can actually help build an internal champion and get momentum to get that done faster. Oftentimes, building an internal consensus or having an internal seller for you is very helpful. And what we're going to discuss today is how do we actually build that consensus much faster by utilizing some tools. So the thing that I want to recommend and what I'll show first here is one of my colleagues, Rulof, actually reviewing a proposal with a tool today. So I'll show this here. I'm going to play this again. Feel free to give me a reaction or just a real life thumbs up if you can hear it.
Couple of minutes of your time to walk you through the proposal I shared. It actually includes all the services we can provide for companies like yours. We discussed primarily training, but I also included the assessment and design elements. So what I found is you have a sales operations with SDRs and AEs.
Great. So I want to pause there. And what Rulof is doing is actually explaining exactly what he heard to the client, explaining the profile of the organization and the recommendations that he's about to make. Furthermore, he continues to go on with this video. You'll see very directly here. He actually pulls up that proposal and walks through it in detail, highlighting specific areas and recommendations based on the conversation that they may have. Now, this is more common than ever because of the environment that we're in today. Throwing the proposal over that proverbial wall now with remote is more common. What I recommend to do is create a video directly for our client. And this now is this asynchronous activity. We want to create this video where we provide a voiceover on the proposal, clearly dictating exactly what we would expect that client to want to know. Now, there's a few benefits here. Wouldn't it make sense and I often get questions like, wouldn't it make sense for the whole team to meet personally? And that's not necessarily the case. And the reason why I believe that is that the decider in this case, the decider here, can actually start to propagate this information throughout the entire organization. Therefore, there's a higher likelihood to close. Also, sharing the proposal in this video format allows us to have a more concise way of communicating the value of our product or service during that time. No longer are we reliant on that internal champion or decider to actually sell it for us. So I think there's been lots of discussions around how to effectively arm your champion with the right types of materials, how to prep them internally to be able to help you get that deal over the line. You eliminate this process because now they can simply propagate that video throughout the entire organization, therefore speeding up the process. The other thing too that I strongly recommend is that I want to share a proposal that is highly editable, or it's something that is able to be commented on. And the reason why that we want to do this is that we can actually share the proposal as this editable or commentable document here, and it allows us to respond to the individual needs of each one of the stakeholders. So we can learn from that particular feedback on the fly, and we can do this without even being on site. So they share this internally now. Then we learn from that particular feedback for each one of those individuals, and then it allows us to address those particular needs. And then the other thing too, there's a few tools to do this. The one that I just showed you is called Soapbox. We also use a tool called BombBomb, and then there's another tool called Loom. So Sari can drop those in the chat, Soapbox, BombBomb, and Loom. They're all very different, but they're very good tools to highlight. In this case, what Roelof is going through here is that he has a clear headshot, he has a screenshot, and he's saying, I price this in response to your request. Based on the information that I know about you, I created this bespoke presentation for you, and I'm creating this video to address each one of your particular needs here. We direct the viewer's attention by highlighting particular sections for where they should look and where they should understand some of the different values that they may have. This helps create and build that consensus here. Furthermore, again, sharing the editable document here, we want to make sure that we open up sharing settings today. This can be done through a few different tools. This one was done directly inside of Google Slides. You can do it through Google Sheets. If there's other sharing tools that allow the editability, allow people to start to comment here, and this will allow you to start to understand what people are actually thinking about. It is a live editable proposal that people are actually able to start to engage in. You're also able to get other individuals involved and see what other constituents are being brought in here. So if there's individuals today that you may not be engaging with, you may see that proposal or that document shared with new individuals by simply opening up the ability to share this document with your prospect. This now helps you better understand who those other individuals are, as well as their personas as they go through there. So in summary, this allows us to personalize the proposal, adds significant relevance, speeds up that back and forth process. So it speeds up the contract negotiation. Points should also be more coherent because they're more clear than the internal buyer trying to sell for us internally. And it also increases our quality, our expert voice throughout that process. And the last thing I want to discuss is our reference call. So setting up reference calls can take weeks. And let's be honest here, most reference calls are skewed to the individual providing the reference call. So usually something like this will happen. If I have Amber looking to have a reference call, I would call up Kit and say, hey, Kit, Amber's about to call you in about a couple hours here. And Kit would gladly say, what do you want me to tell Amber? I'll tell her anything you want. Happy to give a glowing review of yourself and Winning by Design. That right there is a skewed review. And in this case, we don't want a skewed review. We want an honest opinion about how other people have experienced using a product, a tool, services, or worked with individuals. And this is really where tools like G2 can come in. Is everyone familiar with G2? If you are, just give a little thumbs up or reaction inside of there. Thank you for everyone doing that. Okay, so it looks like a lot of us are familiar with G2. This is a really great tool. Now, primarily, most people think about G2 as like reviews of software and reviews of technology, but I want to show you some really interesting places on G2 where you can actually do this as a reference or a referral call. G2 gives you the ability to actually sort and add your LinkedIn connections here. So you can do that by simply going in and creating your account. From there, you're actually able to now start looking at particular user roles. So in this case, we're actually looking at an executive sponsor. And what I mean by an executive sponsor is someone has self-identified themselves as the executive sponsor of that particular deal. So now you are now navigating a reference by the way that someone self-selected. This is not the organization selecting if that person was an executive sponsor. Now what we're able to see here is that how they're actually applying it and using it. So now this is a many-to-one. So now we have Jesse's name here. He's a validated reviewer. It came from an organic source. And what's really interesting about this is now we're getting practical insights on what you can and cannot do. What do you dislike? We purchased from Winning by Design during this time. Recommendations to others considering this provider. This is a candid, honest review that someone put on this site here, and now it's all happening asynchronously. So now we no longer have to struggle with getting two individuals in the same room together, providing what could potentially be a skewed reference in this case, and now we're getting candid, honest feedback by sending them all the reviews that we have about our product. You may be thinking to yourself, well, we don't have any reviews. This process is really easy. You can spin it up for free. Start asking some of your best customers to happily provide a review for you. Now, there may be some incentive that you want to offer them there, but you're really just looking for candid, honest feedback about your impression about working with you here. And this will help you navigate that reference call process that much faster. And then last but not least, which is super interesting about G2, is that you can actually reach out to that individual directly that provided that review. So in this case, if Amber's looking for a review, she can actually reach directly out to Jesse and then engage him by simply using that user contact form here. So in summary, we want to gain valuable insights. There's less skewed calls. They're more objective rather than being something that's more queued up. And the last but not least is it's the ability to network right now. So you can do this asynchronously, again, speeding up the process instead of slowing it down. So the power is in all of the tools that can work synchronously and asynchronously. What we're discussing today is how to really take that asynchronously and make them very powerful and integrate them into what we consider this new way of meetingless selling. So I want everyone in the chat here to take about 60 seconds. Which one of these 5 things stood out the most, and which is something you can actually see yourself doing? So which one of these areas stood out the most, and which tool can you actually see yourself using almost immediately? Great. Thor, navigating the org and proposal review. Ed, proposal review with a video walkthrough and reference call in G2. Matt on lead gen. Vlad, navigating the org. Great. Amber, proposal review presented via recorded video. Sadie, Crystal knows. Yes, that's one of my favorite tools. It's a very affordable tool too. So I think it's $29 or $30 a month or something like that. A very, very effective tool. It's one of those tools that you just want to use. You want to find out more about. Kevin, I like the idea of the video proposal recorded as a video. Great. Propagate that throughout the organization. Great. So there's some actionable things that we can actually take today and start using inside of our sales motion. This does not require a very heavy lift. You can simply make a video almost immediately by either using one of these tools or even getting creative with some of the tool sets that you may have today. So moving on here, and I'll be brief about the last couple areas of this. We have about another 10 minutes or so left. So this mathematical model, applying this here, what we're really going to focus on today is about an enterprise deal. But I want to give everyone some in this, the concept of some of the benchmarks that we have as it relates from this inside sales to SMB. What you're looking at now is some data across all of our clients. This is the contract values, then the wins per year, win rate, sales cycle, how many meetings it typically takes to close that, and the meeting format. The SMB or the inside sales organizations have been doing this 100% remote for a very long time. This is not new to them. Now, what is new is that what happens today is that the enterprise organizations at the bottom here, like I'm showing you, no one in recent memory, and I pulled a few people about this, has actually moved to 100% remote. So what we're seeing is that these are still happening at some point in person, whether that's an industry event, whether it's a larger presentation, whether it's meeting with key stakeholders. And this applies all the way through deals from about 50,000 all the way up into the millions of dollars here. So feel free to screenshot this data here. You guys can use this. The only thing I ask if you guys do screenshot some of the metrics here, feel free to hashtag winning by design or tag us. We always appreciate the attribution here as it relates to some of this content. So this is the screenshotable version. All right, so moving on here, again, no enterprise sales team has gone completely 100% remote. They're still distributed. So we can learn from the 100% remote that we're seeing inside of the actual, inside of the SMB today. We're gonna go through a 100K deal and break this out. We're gonna see here that we have a 100K deal. It takes about 6 deals per year that rep is actually winning with a 28.5% win rate. So if you're selling in the enterprise, use a thumbs up or reaction to drop enterprise in the chat. So thumbs up on the reaction or drop the word enterprise in the chat, please. All right, a couple thumbs up here, people selling into the enterprise. And when I consider enterprise, we're going to talk about this $100,000 deal. So for the folks that did give me a thumbs up or did drop something in the chat there, can you tell me, are these pretty accurate what you're seeing today for approximately $100,000 deal? Just a yes or no or a thumbs up in the chat. So yes or no, are these numbers pretty accurate? About 6 deals per year, 150-day sales cycle, about 12 meetings or so, and you're doing about half of them remote. So this is some data across all of our clients here. So it seems like we have a consensus that these are pretty accurate. Great. So when thinking about these deals, okay, Kevin, yeah, 150 days actually probably is pretty fast here. So we can make it a little bit longer, but that would make my math even better. I don't want to give too many unfair advantages. So thinking about this is that we think about win rate today as the opportunity versus that win rate. So when thinking about this win rate today, the rate is wins over ops, wins over ops. So the 2 variables that we have today is wins or ops. And the 2 most common things about it that people think about today is I want either more at-bats or I want a higher win ratio. So I want more at-bats, I want more opportunities to work through, or I want to win more of those win more of less deals, excuse me. So any salesperson will tell you that you don't turn wins into ops. It's a series of actions, meetings, calls, and emails. It doesn't just happen in this very linear format where you just put an opportunity in and then it pops out as a win here. And this is actually not the only way to look at it. So now we're looking at it here is that the opportunity actually turns into a win through a series of meetings. Every win and win rate is the product of the conversion rate of all of these independent meetings. It is the product of all of these independent meetings. And in between here, you see here, what I'm using to measure this is just using calendared meetings. And then all of the dots in between here are the emails and calls that you have in between. These are a little bit harder to measure. So I'm really just thinking about the calendared meetings here. So these are the meetings that we're thinking about today to help us move over here. Again, the win rate is a product of all these independent meetings over the course of that deal cycle. The most important thing that can happen with the win rate is based on this series of 12 consecutive meetings here. Being the product of those independent meetings is that now we need to multiply this as an independent conversion rate. So now what I'm taking is the conversion rate from meeting 1, conversion rate from meeting 2, so on and so forth to actually across those 12 meetings. And that's how I'm getting my 28.5% here. So I'm converting these here. Anyone today, does anyone have the conversion rates inside of the chat with just a Y or N? Does anyone measure their conversion rates from stage to stage today or meeting to meeting today? Just put a Y or N in the chat. Do you feel comfortable with the data that you have measuring your meeting conversion rate from meeting to meeting or stage to stage? Amber, I see a yes there. Yes. Okay. Stage to stage, great. I think most people have stage to stage. Some people don't have meeting to meeting. Sometimes they don't map exactly to each one of those particular meetings. So thank you, Thor. Yes, somewhat comfortable, great, okay. Stage to stage for most there. Okay, great. So I think most people have stage to stage, but whenever you think about it, it is the combination of all of those meetings together. Now, the other thing too that we have to layer in here is also time. So adding the time in here, the time in between each one of these, we're multiplying the conversion rates across each one of the meetings, but we're adding the time together. So the time in between each one of these, I can add these up, and that's what brings us to our 150-day sales cycle. So I just want to give you a little bit of the math behind where we're at here to understand the model before we kind of fully jump into it. So 12 meetings, 28.5% conversion rate is the conversion rate of each one of the meetings multiplied together to get to our win. And then the time added together is the 150 days. All right, so before I move on and kind of wrap this up here, we're going to talk about the impact as it relates to the efficiency here. Now, this is the anatomy of $100,000 deals. I'm now applying this to an enterprise deal. The same $100,000 deal that we talked about previously, this probably makes a lot of sense to most people. This is probably how you think about your deal cycle today. So in this case, I would have 21 opportunities with my first calendar meeting. 80% of those, and what I'm depicting with the arrows here, 80% of those convert, and that turns into 17 meetings, the second level here of meeting 2. If 90% of those meetings convert, then that turns into 15 meetings, so on and so forth. We also have additional days in between there. So now I'm just breaking out the conversion metrics for each one of those meetings, and then each one of the days that sum us back up to 6 wins, 28.5%, and then the days of sales cycle. Now, I want to apply this now to where what I want to do is map this back to a playbook. Now, we have the disco demo, we have the demo assist, we also have the propose and the commit stages. I'm oversimplifying this just for the sake of this presentation, but also the way that we like to think about these. So I'm putting this into the case of these 12 meetings. So in this case, I would have 1 or 2 discovery meetings, 2 demo meetings, maybe a solution or a technical demonstration. Then we have meetings where we assist or digest more information or help the prospect understand a little bit more about our value prop. Then we propose solutions that maybe with one, our primary champion, and then a larger stakeholder meeting. And then there might be 2 or 3 meetings to discuss the commitment. That's the commercials or any other aspects of that deal here. Now, thinking about this, the square root to the power of 12 here, I can use that linear conversion rate here. And that conversion rate across meetings requires us to have a 90% conversion rate. So I need to, and we're using linear conversions here, I need to, on average, convert every meeting at 90%. I need to convert every meeting at 90% to achieve that 28.5% win ratio that we just discussed. Now, if I cut down the meeting, if I cut out the win rate, and we have a response to this through the asynchronous experiences that we just discussed I'm creating a more effective sales process. Therefore, no longer needing to have 12 meetings, I'm now reducing my meeting cycle down by 2 meetings. So we simply eliminated 2 meetings now down to 10 meetings, and this results in a higher win rate. So effectively, if we're still converting them at that 90%, but we're having less meetings, we have a higher win rate now. 90% to the power of 10, because they're multiplied, create this exponential impact. So that small change in that 90% will result in a large change to the win rate.
From Google Chrome.
This is the power of actually having something high that will have a huge or a very large impact onto the individuals. So the same thing here. So assuming that we make some small changes to a proper setup, a backdrop, time management, chat, proposal review, managing content, this is that moment in time where I can make a small change and say that conversion rate just from meeting to meeting goes up by simply 2%. From meeting to meeting, it goes up simply by 2%. This can make a huge impact. And if I multiply this across those 10 meetings, this combination creates compound impact, therefore increasing this massive gain here. So this all makes sense inside of thinking about this from a mathematic perspective, but you're thinking to yourself, how do I actually make this effective? How do I actually do this? So I would love to increase my effectiveness by 2% or reduce the amount of meetings that I have by 1% or 2 there. This is what we're seeing now. We're changing these two things at once. If we're taking those 12 meetings, we have 12 and a half days in between there. We're reducing them down. Now we can reduce our sales cycle by over 40 days now. Now we can reduce our sales cycle by over 40 days simply by saying we're eliminating those 2 meetings, taking the average of what our typical sales cycle is. I think it's even been noted that that might even be a little bit longer than what most people expected, but we take those deals today and now we're shrinking that 10 and a half or the 12 and a half days between meetings now to much less. So now we have 11 days. So we're shaving off a day and a half in between those meetings, thereby making our sales cycle even shorter today, decreasing the number of meetings, the days between them, fewer meetings due to Zoom and asynchronous. This becomes more realistic. So once every, every 2 weeks we're having a meeting, which seems pretty realistic in this case, every 11 days or so. Now, the science behind it proves that now we can reduce the number of meetings, we can increase the win rate, and we can start using remote to do that. On average, if we think about this 90 to the increase of 92% over the short term of the sales cycle, we can start to influence the sales cycle and we can capture more of this market share. We can capture more of this market share, thereby and now we can prove that we shorten the sales cycle, increase the win rate. Competitors are now sitting on the tarmac in this case, and we're thinking about how we've already done a discovery meeting, we synced on a proposal, and now we can win more market share. So our goal here is to speed up the sales cycle and increase our win rate by using the asynchronous here. The other thing too, for the folks that are selling in the enterprise versus the SMB, this is usually where I get a little pushback from SMB sales reps, but what is the true difference between enterprise sales reps and SMB sales reps, and why do we actually pay enterprise sales reps that much more than SMB sales reps? If you look about it, if you look at this, the stats here, if you think about it, across 4 meetings, the average rep needs to do about a 64.2% win rate, where enterprise reps actually need to convert 12 meetings, right, at a 90% efficiency rate for that 28.5% overall win rate. So this is why we pay the increased salary. And without proper training, this can be a disaster. So this is why promoting an SMB rep into the enterprise is not the most effective strategy without proper training and understanding about how to navigate the organization, some of the things that we just discussed today. This is our win rate over meetings. So in summary, I'm going to just wrap this up here. We can start to eliminate some of the efficiency through prep, travel time, and the total time spent here. So we're depicting right now how much time is actually being spent to prepare for each one of these meetings, maybe 5-6 hours. If we're traveling conservatively, we may have the number of days in between that. So how much time it takes to actually travel there on site. But we're also adding the concept of taking this compound impact manipulates the number of deals times in the win ratio, 1 hour of discovery, 1 hour prep, and 2 hours of follow-up here. So thereby we're reducing this number. If I travel, it automatically adds 8 hours of travel time. Many could argue that this is conservative, but it could actually be a lot more here. So just to summarize here, what we're thinking about today is that the time spent on average could be about 1,300 hours here. But now if we're reducing that by doing things more asynchronously, we can reduce that down to even less, thereby either increasing our efficiency or our effective rate across that. All right, so just to wrap up here, for many of you that know us, we'll discuss some about the next steps, but I want to just pull everyone here as a way to wrap this up. What is your key takeaway from the session? What is your key takeaway from the session? Drop it in the chat here and we'll wrap up. Key takeaway from today's session. One key takeaway from today's session. One key takeaway from today's session. All right, math works. Thank you, Vlad. More meetings, more meaningless deals, move things forward. Use data and insights to fuel the sales cycle efficiently. Great. Looking at stage-to-stage conversion rates more effectively. Great. So some great insights here, some great takeaways from today's session. How do we do that? So if you guys know Winning by Design, for those who know us, this is what we offer. Playbooks, tools, training on the expertise to do those things. I do think that this is one really effective thing, whether you're the SVP or VP of sales or someone in sales operations, or you're in the field. This is how we can actually create a plan. 1 and 2 can actually be reversed, but here's a 30, 60, 90-day plan. Everyone feel free to take a screenshot of this. If you do share it out publicly, feel free to attribute it to us. But this is intended to start the process internally. Not taking any action today will leave you on the same path, and people will pass you up if they start to adopt more meaningless selling, more asynchronous across that. So feel free to take a screenshot here. This is where you can start to generate a plan across June, July, and August, adapt to this new selling environment. I strongly believe that we're never going to go back to the same kind of way that we're selling previously, that we're going to walk back into a place, pump on a little hand sanitizer, and then just run a meeting the same way. So we all need to start to adapt onto this meaningless selling kind of mindset. How do we actually start shortening our sales cycle? How do we become more effective by using synchronous and asynchronous together here? So feel free to reach out to anyone on the team here. I also have Kit with us today. We'll do a quick Q&A at the end here. We'll finish up at 11:15, but feel free to reach out. We do some work with companies here. The other thing here is just one more thing that comes out of this is that 2008 brought us a lot of changes inside sales processes, two-step sales organizations, marketing and sales automation, and lots of tools that go along with it, as well as the advent of really strong customer success and the whole concept of MQL, SQL, SAL. These are all new things that were born out of the recession that happened there. And I believe the same thing is actually going to happen to enterprise sales now, thinking about it happening in 2020. The sales process will become remote architected. We're going to automate a lot of these processes with tools today. We're going to have very specialized skills across each one of those motions across the sales process, and everything is going to become that much more data-driven. Well, the stage has been set now for enterprise and remote selling and how do we become more effective and shorten our deal cycle. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Everyone's free to go now, but if you want to ask some questions, we're going to happy to hang back for a couple more minutes. Otherwise, it was great seeing everyone.